Hello everyone. I am Dr. Susenfa Gogoi, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, North Lakhimpur College, Autonomous. Welcome you all to your favorite channel on political science, e-Politica. Today I'm here to present another important module in one of the important concepts of political science in general and international relations in particular. It's called Cold War. So this module is prepared for the students of class 12 higher secondary arts pursuing political science, and this would also help the undergraduate and postgraduate students who have international relations as a paper. Now, the very idea of Cold War has been considered as one of the most important popular international events that took place after the Second World War, and it stays until the 1990s, until the collapse of Soviet Union. Therefore, it has a very deep history and has a very deep impact on the politics and economy of the world. So today's module would be mainly titled as Cold War, meaning, history and causes. So without a further ado, let us begin. Now, this module more particularly has the following objectives. After listening to the module, the students would be able to understand what is the meaning of Cold War. They would also able to understand from when the Cold War has started. They would also understand what are the causes of Cold War, and after listening to this module, they would able to answer what changes have brought by the Cold War after the Second World War. So with these objectives in mind, this present current module is prepared for the students. Now, before we talk about what do we mean by Cold War, we have to understand what is a general or conventional idea about a war. Now, the very idea of war has been considered as a direct state of affair, a real state of affair among two opponent countries, where one country shows an aggressive behavior against another by the use of large-scale arms and ammunition. So conventionally, war therefore means a kind of arbitrary, aggressive relationship between countries or a group of countries. Therefore, the very idea of war is direct, it is based on aggression, and it is mostly dependent on arms and ammunition. Therefore, war has a definite techniques. So what are the definite techniques? War basically means use of modern tools. For example, new types of weapons are being used nowadays. There are different other ways of fighting wars, naval wars, air wars. So there are different kinds of wars. And with the changes of time, there are new arms and ammunitions that have also entered in the human civilization, which made war as more devastating. So the consequences of war is also known. In a war kind of a situation, either one party is going to win the war, one party is going to be defeated, or there would be some kind of understanding by making some kind of a bargaining among the war partners or the war opponents. So therefore, the consequences of the war is also known. Therefore, conventionally, the idea of war has been considered as an active war affair, and it is generally considered to be hot. Why it is considered to be hot? Because it is used large-scale aggression, large-scale arms and ammunition are being deployed. Then, if the idea of war is so violent, if the idea of war is so aggressive, then what is the idea of Cold War? If the war is hot, why do we call a certain segment of war as cold? Now, war can be understood as two types. Either it can be a hot warfare or can be a cold war. Now, the very idea of Cold War is completely different from the conventional idea of the war. Why? Because Cold War is considered to be indirect and it is more competitive. It basically means that in a general understanding of war, it talks about the direct, aggressive, armed kind of a relationship among the rival groups. But here, the rivalry is still there. There has been some kind of a competition, but there is no direct confrontation between the rival partners. Rather, there has been an indirect, provocative kind of a situation where one group of country or one state try to put the opponent into some kind of a pressure by which the opponent country would get the advantage of the interest to be fulfilled without being confronting the opponent with aggression or in real kind of a war. So the very idea of Cold War is therefore considered to be indirect because the idea of war in a Cold War kind of situation is to putting the opponent under a war-like situation, but not in a real war, but to put them in a fear psychosis. So the fear of war is more important than the war in real sense in what we understand as Cold War. So that is the basic difference between a conventional idea of war and a Cold War. Now, when we talk about Cold War, the very idea of Cold War, as I have already mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, that it was developed after the Second World War, and it has something to do with two countries. One is United States of America, another one was United States of Soviet Russia. So it was USSR or Soviet Union, you can call it. So it was a known fact that after the Second World War, the world was largely divided into two pools. And both of the pools of the world was led by two superpowers. One was United States of America and another was USSR. It was very interesting enough to inform our students that prior to the Cold War, until the end of the Second World War, USA and USSR, Soviet Union, had a very close relationship. Indeed, they were also in the same side during the Second World War. But after the Second World War had over, due to certain reasons which we would discuss in the later part of this presentation, there has been a gap created between USA and USSR, which created a segment of competition, a sense of rivalry among the USA and USSR, which created the Cold War. So therefore, the very idea of Cold War is associated with the competition between USA and USSR and their respective allies. Now, since the Cold War was not fought directly between USA and USSR, therefore it is also considered to be as war of nerves or political and economic propaganda war, and also as war of ideology. Why it is war of nerves? It is considered as war of nerves because the one party, that is USA, that it tries to put the USSR into pressure. Same way the USSR also tried to put USA under pressure. So it was a game of nerves. So who is going to win the battle of nerves? That was the whole agenda of this Cold War. So therefore, many people also consider it as war of nerves. Then many people also consider it as political and economic propaganda war, simply because both USA and USSR try to defame the status of USA and USSR in the global politics, and they try to, minimize the impact of these countries as superpowers. So therefore, there's some kind of a propaganda was going on. USSR, they try to demoralize the character of USA in front of the global people. Same thing was also happened to USSR by USA. So it was also considered to be a war of propaganda. Then it was also considered as a war of ideology because mostly the conflict between USA and USSR was for sustaining their own ideological position. That would also we will discuss in the later period. Now, the very idea of Cold War, the term itself was first used by an English writer. His name was George Orwell. So, Mr. George Orwell, in the year 1945, he published an article where he used the term called Cold War. And he used this term to predict the nuclear stalemate between two or three monstrous superstates. What does it mean? It means that he used the term Cold War in order to predict about what is going to happen in the future between the superpowers regarding of holding nuclear powers. So for him, the idea of Cold War was associated between the nuclear rivalry among the superpowers. But in a real sense of term, the Cold War was actually uh, to be coined by an American financier and the presidential advisor. His name was Bernard Barros. So Mr. Bernard Barros was the first person to coin the Cold War in its own situation. He contextualized Cold War as rivalry between USA and USSR. In the year 1947, Mr. Bernard Barros, he made in his lecture in the State House of Columbia in South Carolina, he made a statement where he said that let us not to be deceived today, we are amidst Cold War. So he was quite certain that after the Second World War, the world has entered into a phase of a Cold War where the USA and USSR were the rival partners. They were no more friends. Although they were friends earlier, they were no more friends. Now let us very quickly talk about how these things were happening. For that, we need to go back a little bit to the history. You know, from 28 July 1914 to 11th November 1918, the First World War had happened. And during this First World War, one thing was very certain that USA and USSR, they suddenly came up as the world's most superpowers. The world has started admiring them to becoming the next superpowers. Same thing was also noticed during 1st September 1939 to 2nd September 1945. These were the years when the Second World War had happened. During the Second World War also, we noticed that USA and USSR shows its superpowers. It shows its caliber to consider to be the superpowers of the world. Interestingly, during the Second World War, there were two parties. The first party was known as the Allies, and the second party was known as the Axis power. USA, USSR, England, France were the Allies, and Germany, Italy, and Japan constituted the Axis power. Now, interestingly, although USA and USSR were in the same side, but after the atom bomb attack, or you can call it atom bomb explosion, in Nagasaki and Hiroshima by United States of America on August 1945, the situation had changed enormously. Because USSR were completely ignorant about the nuclear capacity or atomic capacity of USA. So USA did not let the USSR know about their nuclear energy. So that created a sense of suspicion in the minds of the leaders of USSR, which at the end created the situation of Cold War. So therefore, after the Second World War, there has been a gross division of the world into two blocks. The one block that was led by USA and another one was led by USSR. Now, what were the causes of Cold War then? First cause of Cold War was the ideological difference between USA and USSR. United States of America and Soviet Union, both of them were quite different in their ideological position. USA followed largely the capitalist ideology, whereas USSR follows the socialist or communist ideology. And as we all know, both capitalism and communism stand far apart, a pool apart. So both of these concepts or ideologies are quite different. So therefore, that difference in ideology has also led to sense of difference between USA and USSR, which also constituted one of the important reasons for Cold War. The second cause was the arms race. As we all know, after the Second World War, both the countries they tried to capture more and more arms and ammunitions, invented arms they try to capture. So that kind of an arms race also contributed for the growth of a situation of Cold War. For example, after the Second World War, once the atomic bomb was experimented by United States of America in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, it created a sense of inferiority in the minds of the leaders of USSR. Therefore, they have started investing lots of money in the defense budget. So that shows the kind of sense of competition, the sense of pressure that was put by USA over USSR, which led to the situation of Cold War. The third cause behind the Cold War was competition over sphere of influence. Now, what is this sphere of influence? In international relations, every country tried to become dominant over the other countries. So therefore, the powerful country, they try to keep a hold over the weaker countries. I mean, those countries who are less powerful than them. During this, the period of Cold War, it was noticed that United States of America, they try to put a influence over the Western European countries, and in order to have a hold over this country, they have comes up with different kinds of economic sanctions, financial aid, other different kind of diplomatic policies, so that they can have a control over the Western European countries. Same thing was also noticed with the USSR, because USSR also tried to maintain its sphere of influence over the Eastern European countries. So therefore, in order to maintain the sphere of influence, both USA and USSR, they try to maintain the dominance over Western and Eastern Europe, which actually create a sense of competition among them. So USA had the fear that in maybe the communist model of USSR might also got deepened in the sphere of influence of USA, or the capitalist model of USA could also have a influence over the USSR's sphere of influence. So that kind of a competition had also contributed for the growth of Cold War. So that is also one of the important reasons behind the Cold War. The next important reason behind Cold War was the secrecy of atomic bomb. Secrecy of atomic bomb. As it was already mentioned in the previous slides, I told you that United States of America, they kept the secrecy of having the nuclear energy. So the USSR was completely ignorant about United States of America's nuclear power. So that was one of the important reasons. Only after the 6th September and 8th September 1945, 45, when this Nagasaki and Hiroshima incident had happened, August it was happened. Then only USSR came to know about the USA's power, the nuclear power. So that has also contributed a sense of suspicion in the minds of the leaders of USSR, which later contributed for the growth of sense of Cold War among these countries. The next cause behind the Cold War was conflict over use of veto power. Now, what is this veto power? After the First World War, to maintain world peace and harmony, and to maintain the order at the global level, an organization was created, international organization was created. The name of the organization was League of Nations. But apparently, League of Nations failed to maintain the peace among the countries, which because of which the Second World War had happened. But after the Second World War, again to create harmony among the countries, maintain peace and tranquility among the countries, another important organization was created, and the name of the organization was United Nations Organization, UNO. Although UNO was created, inside UNO there were certain organizations, and among them one of the important organization one was the Security Council. And the members of the Security Council got a special power, and name of the power was called veto power. And the members of the Security Council can use the veto power in order to support or oppose any kind of decision to be taken in the Security Council. So after the Second World War, it was noticed that USSR often uses veto power in order to oppose any decision that was in favor of United States of America. So that also had been considered as one of the important reasons behind the Cold War. Another important reason behind the Cold War was considered to be the United States of America's role during the Second World War itself. It was noticed that in the Second World War, the USA was supposed to send the army support to USSR to defeat the Axis power, but United States of America was blamed for making unnecessary delay in sending the armed support to USSR. So that was also contributed as one of the important reasons behind the causes of Cold War. So by and large, these are the major causes behind the Cold War. But the one important reason why the Cold War had happened was the sense of mutual suspicion and mutual distrust. Why it is mutual distrust? Because both of the countries, they have started losing the trust they had during the Second World War. Although they were in the same side, they were the friends, they were in the same side, they fought together the Second World War, but slowly and gradually they have started losing the trust they had earlier. So that was the important reason why the Cold War had taken place. So these are the causes of Cold War. So in this particular module, we have learned what do we mean by Cold War, what are the brief history that contributed for the growth of Cold War, and what were the causes or reasons behind the Cold War. I hope student had got the objectives that was made for this module. If you have any questions and queries, please feel free to write in the comment section. And if you have any doubts, you can write me to gogoi.susang@gmail.com. That is my email ID. Please feel free to contact me. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe so that the future content would be available to you at first. So with this, I'm signing off. I hope we would again meet with another module on contemporary world politics. You are watching e-Politica. So till then, stay safe. Jai Hind.